Now, a lot of people always put in the motto, sex sells. But the thing is, I always find that motto interesting. I find it interesting because it's way too generalized, and diving in deeper into the meaning of this motto brings up some interesting points to discuss. Yes, in some ways, sex does sell, but which part of sex that sells? Which part of the sex appeal that would obliterate your genital senses? Well, to answer your question, it's complicating. The reason is because everybody has different turn-ons and turn-offs. Some people are turned on by this, while others are turned off by that. Some people find certain body parts appealing, while others don't find it appealing. It's the ancient argument of, do you prefer asses or tits or thick thighs? And for the women, do you prefer the abs or asses or dicks? And for the homosexuals, do you prefer, well, you get the idea. Now, thanks to the huge differences between men and women and how incredibly subjective our sexual triggers are and how drastically different our reactions can be when dealing with another sex that we are attracted to, in order to achieve a true equality between the sexes in terms of sexualization, the key here is not how they are depicted, but how people react to it. People need to distinguish between the equality of depiction and equality of effect, because the two are incredibly different. The equality of depiction is an argument which basically says, if anime or games show panty shots of women, then men should also have panty shots. As if panty shots of men's bottoms would create the same intended effect? Some people, mostly feminists, always pull this argument off in the name of equality, but in my opinion, it doesn't work. Panty shots of men are not going to be as effective as panty shots of women, especially considering that men's attires and women's attires are different. Unless you're Nightwing and a tight spandex. Come to think of it, using him to argue this is a really bad example. Now, I am more in favor of equality of effect, which can be a little bit hard to comprehend. This is basically saying, if anime or games with panty shots exist and it turns men on, what would be the female equivalent that also turns women on? Should it be literally the same game with the genders reversed? Or should that game be done in a different manner or different aesthetics or different approach in the purpose of turning women on? What body part does it take to satisfy the women? I'm sure it has to be different because it cannot be the same. Both genders have different turn-ons and turn-offs, and in order to achieve true equality, we need to figure out what each genders are turned on by in general. The most generalized answer is for men, they're turned on with boobs and asses. For women, they're turned on with abs and asses and dicks? Hey, video games, what's the problem with dicks? Wow, I can't believe I'm talking about these topics. Quality YouTube content, everybody. Now, again, answering that question would be a bit too complicating, especially when we're talking about sexual triggers, which are incredibly subjective from person to person. Understanding what makes people getting turned on is a key for success, and it gives a lot more meaning to the meaningless motto of sex sells. Which part of sex that sells? Does it need to take effort for the sex to sell? How much effort does it need? The article shows a game called Genital Jousting, a game which is basically about dildos just shoving each other, or what appears to be dildos. Maybe actual dicks, I don't really know. Now, I like the fact that this game exists and people are playing it and enjoying it. Quality content on Steam indeed. However, why would people, more specifically game journalists, celebrate the existence of this game more than the existence of games like Bayonetta? Bayonetta shows an actually hot female character, while this game shows a bunch of dildos shoving each other. Not exactly going to create the same intended effect, but then again, it's not meant to be. The equivalent of Bayonetta would be Final Fantasy 15. There are articles of people mocking everybody who gets turned on by Bayonetta, but then there are also articles of people getting turned on by Final Fantasy 15's boy band lineup. This shows two things. Game journalists are hypocrites, and it doesn't really take a lot to please the women. Just show an attractive boy and they wet their panties. They don't even have to show their abs. But honestly, I don't really believe that's true though. I think it would take a lot more effort for women to get turned on. I don't know, women, you tell me. The game development industry is obsessed with boobs. They come in all sizes, though most of them are comically large and weirdly ovoid. You should check out the Flat Justice Society. They would like to have a word with you.
爆裂魔法を打った後、お前をおぶって帰ってた時、 平らな胸の感触を少しでも感じられるようにわざと揺らしたり体勢を変えたりしてたんだ。
They jiggle like jelly, they wobble like cheesecake, and they bounce like toddlers on a rigid diet of Skittles and Red Bull. They're usually everything but realistic, but in-game boobs are like a separate thing to real-life boobs. People love them despite their anatomical inaccuracies. Should I do an Ada's trailer voice? You know what people love and can also be anatomically inaccurate? Abs. Abs.
What a huge success, huh? Hear that pun?
But where are all the dicks? People love to make the argument every time I write something complaining about boobs. Then I'd probably just love it if everyone had their wangs out, wouldn't I? Yeah, we bet you like that, you double standard having sexist. Ooh, look who's talking.
You're a sexist, egotistical, lying, hypocritical bigot.
Actually, yeah, I'm up for that. Nudity in games should be cool, like it is in mainland Europe. Heads up, if you go on a beach over there, everyone's gonna be naked. It's not so much that I have a problem with boobs in games, it's more that there's generally only two types of them in games. There are stiff, unmoving boobs, and there are boobs that yearn to want to escape their fleshy confines forever. Well, nudity can be cool. Someone being nude in a game can be cool, but some depictions of nudity can also be uncomfortable and disturbing as well. Just compare and contrast to the depiction of, well, not really nudity, but sexuality in games like Bayonetta, and that scene where Trevor Phillips from GTA 5 drops his pants and shows his balls off. Contrast. So yes, more dicks. Dicks in every shape, size, color, and girth. Dicks with bends in them. Dicks with huge veins. You know how diversity's normalized with saturation? The same applies to genitals, my friends. I'm not talking full penetration of games. I don't really fancy having todgers all up in Tetris. But more people making games with male nudity will hopefully make it more culturally acceptable. Not that I disagree, but we should ask ourselves on whether or not dicks are the most pleasant thing in the world to have in common video games. If people want to challenge the status quo and glorify and beautify dicks as well on the pop culture, go for it. Try to challenge it. But I have a couple of notes here. Don't be lazy. Be passionate about it. Actually get to it. Actually have ambition for it. Unfortunately, ambition is the sort of thing that are lacking among the community who are asking for the normalization of dicks in fiction. I have no problem if you're striving for it. I have no problem if you're just gonna march out in a certain game developer studio and demand dicks or something. But I do have a problem with you marching out for like a couple of seconds and then sleeping in the couch, tweeting the next hashtag activism because you're not so passionate on doing your work. We should be able to joke about genitalia. Sometimes teabagging your own face is a good antidote to everything else in the world. Again, do I disagree? No, absolutely not. However, we're living in a time where joking about genitalia or even gender-related stuff can get you scorned and ridiculed because of how politically incorrect it is. Unless if you're talking about periods for some reason. A few games have been dabbling in dicks, and I'm going to be talking specifically about Rust, Conan Exiles, and Genital Jousting, 3 games renowned for their knobs. Rust was a controversial one, though they all to some extent because the world isn't ready for dongs, because it was assigned to every player different size pecker based on their Steam ID. It was a masterstroke, but one that the player didn't quite appreciate, despite it being pretty similar to, real life. Well, if that's the case, that's not exactly controversial, that's just random. People who are asking about resizing of these materials are probably not entirely serious and giggle in their heads of how dumb that request sounds. Penis havers in their hundreds throng to forums attempting to mask their real-life penile disappointment by yelling about their virtual life penile disappointment. We can only assume, but who cares if your polygonal pork sword won't impress the ladies? You're in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, son. Concentrate on surviving. So in other words, ha ha, your dick is small, ha ha. And if you make that sort of comparison, that's like saying playing muscular men in Skyrim is just one way for people to hide of how they're not muscular in real life. I think the point of living in a fantasy world like Rust is to be however we want it to be, including biggest dickus.
What about you? Do you find it usable?
No, not that biggest dickus. Conan Exiles, on the other hand, has some of the most impressive meat sticks for some time, and not only because you can edit their length, happy now, Rust players, the wang physics and the ways you can exploit them for humor are a thing of beauty. There's been a swathe of incredible beef gifts since Conan Exiles was released, celebrating their Okay, we get it. Conan Exiles give you the penile satisfaction that you couldn't get in real life. Wait a second. This is written by Kate Gray? As in the Nintendo shield chick that says the Fire Emblem Fates censorship was not censorship, but it's localization? As in the chick who says turning sushis into hamburgers is acceptable because morons in the West cannot comprehend sushis? Look, Kate, that Fire Emblem Fates minigame where you pet your waifus, yeah, how is that any less creepy and explicit than actual freaking todgers? Is it because the people who enjoy it? Are you saying that men who enjoy petting their 2D waifus are creepy anime weebs? Well, I can also say that women who enjoy and begged for penile depictions are lowly 30-something virgins who spend their time jerking off to yaois and 50 Shades of Grey. You have pathetic virgins too on your gender. Don't think that this is an exclusively men thing.
引きこもりのゲームオタクに期待はしてないから。
It's really important that dicks can be silly, cute, and fun in games because it challenges the atmosphere of toxic masculinity that pervades the industry and the community. Wangs in real life are so often a symbol of power and dominance, so when they're depicted as these comical little wiggle boys, it takes away some of their authority. Oh, you're that kind of person. You're the kind of person who makes me to reuse this clip over and over again.
Your so-called club activities are nothing more than debasing macho fantasies. I promise you, we will bring you guys down. All hail Super Club!
You see, people become feminists for lots of different reasons. The most common reason that I see on why people are becoming feminists is to challenge the status quo of men, toxic masculinity, and driving equality where it needs to be. That can be interpreted as men have done injustices towards us, therefore we can commit injustices towards them as well. Now that brings me to another question. Do you think adding literal dicks would do good for gaming as a whole? If we're talking about a more serious gaming market, it's unfortunately populated with boys, and in order for people to challenge that status quo, there needs to be a lot of work done other than complaining on the internet. More women need to work and be interested in more serious video games. Unfortunately, not a lot of them are willing to give in and dedicate themselves and sacrifice their money or time for video games because it requires a lot of them. It requires a lot of work, dedication, and sacrifices, and women in general don't want to get through that. Do you think that having depictions of male genitals in the serious gaming market would actually help on challenging the status quo of this toxic masculinity you're talking about? Do you actually put more thoughts on the things that you're writing? I made a video in which I went through several video game genres in which women dominate. Number 5 is high fantasy MMO, and right down under was JRPG. Women dominate the most in match 3 games. You know what that means? Reverse harem honeypop. Fucking make that please. So I agree that there is dominance on men in video games, but I disagree that the solution to overcome this certain dominance is to tell men that their dicks are small and can be joked around, haha. I think one of the solutions to overcome this certain dominance and challenge the status quo is to actually have women to be more dedicated on video games, have more women to be interested in video games, have more women to actually want to play games. However, we don't have that, and not a lot of women actually want to work up their ways to play video games, so that is a huge problem. Of course, because the game development community is overwhelmingly male, we're likely to only get this dick-centric approach to genitalia, and it'll probably take a while to get the same sort of approach to vaginas, but maybe that's for the best. There's a lot of political, cultural, and social meaning behind the vagina. Wow, this paragraph shows quite a lot of bias in our part, isn't it? Vaginas are off limits for the best. I thought you said that joking about genitals is okay. I don't even... Again, equality of depiction or equality of effect. I am more in favor of equality of effect, and I am more in favor of having women to also be turned on with certain games. I'm in favor of having games with attractive men, like most JRPGs out there. I am not in favor of equality of depiction. Just because men are equally depicted as women doesn't mean that it would reach the same effect. That is, unless if women are turned on with men shoving their dicks out, which... No, they don't. Abs are okay though.
I don't think that gender equality can be achieved by having everyone naked all the time always, because the world isn't that easy and problems can't always be solved by taking all your clothes off. But as the video game industry becomes engorged, swollen, tumescent with penises, I can only assume that more interesting and varied stories can be told. The work of Robert Yang is a fantastic place to start.
If you don't know who Robert Yang is, he's the guy who make those games sexualizing gay men. Well, if that's your thing, that's your thing. But the market is not seeking for these sorts of games. They're very niche, and not a lot of masters are gonna agree with you on this.
We shouldn't be afraid to push boundaries, because the radicals, the extremes, and the fringes of society are what will continue to drive us forward and to normalize weirder stuff, allowing us to explore new horizons. To put it more simply, dicks will change the world.
Normalize weirder stuff? In that case, let's have 2D waifu petting. Oh, that one is not okay apparently. Alright, fine. So what can we learn today? Well, we can learn that feminists are doing their absolute best to just make men uncomfortable because they want revenge. If there are chances in which you can make men the most uncomfortable, they're gonna do it, including shoving dicks to everyone. Well, the thing is, feminists have never strived for gender equality in the first place. They just strive to please themselves. And even if they are striving for gender equality, I wouldn't trust them because they're not very smart in making sense of their arguments, and they don't really put a lot of thoughts on whatever kind of cause that they're trying to fight. Like I said previously, if you want to achieve equality in the sexes in terms of sexualization of fictional characters, you need to understand what turns on what gender in general first. You can't just do this.
ほらほらねえほら何触れてんだよほれ脱いでみろおい早く
Before we end this video, huge thanks to Joe Matthews for the pledge on Patreon. You are fantastic. That's all for the video today. If you like this, you can go ahead, click the like button, and subscribe for more. If you wish, you can support me on Patreon. And thanks for watching.